You're listening to Theater in College Hoops. I am Subi. Alongside me, Taylor Dammel. We're brought to you by Belly Up Media. Go download, subscribe, rate, and review us on whichever device it is that you use. Your college hooper of the day. We got Shabazz Napier as our college hooper of the day, Taylor. So I know that's not random. I know that's not a peculiar name or a obscure name. But the reason I brought him up is because we're going to dive into some of the more notable mid majors and whether or not you wherever you land on the American Athletic Conference. I personally think it just depends on the year as it relates to the teams and how good they're going to be. And Houston just left. That was their biggest wagon. So I'm back to thinking the AAC is a mid-major. To bring this all full circle, why did I pick Shabazz Napier? Well, he was the inaugural player of the year for this conference for UConn. So again, Shabazz is not a obscure name, legendary Miami Heat player, one of your boys, but he's going to be a good trivia question down the road. Who was the first ever AAC player of the year? It was Shabazz Napier. And people don't ever forget that little stint that UConn had there. Check out the website at theaterincollegehoops.com and make sure to follow me at CBB Theater to find out where the theat is. You should also follow Taylor at Taylor Dammel. Let's open the curtains. TD, welcoming you back in from the home of the NL champs, baby. Last time we were talking shop, we were entering war in Game 7 at the bank, and now it's time to go to Arlington and get that Game 1 dub.
You know, I got a little bit of flack earlier today from a longtime listener of this program that thinks that this show has just become talking baseball with Subi and Taylor. So
We're versatile.
Yeah, listen, we are chameleons. We have to adapt to what's going on around us. No, it's going to be fun. It is the city is abuzz here, and word on the street is I'm going to Game 4 Halloween night in downtown Phoenix at the Bob. As a lifelong Diamondbacks fan, we still call it the Bob. We still call it the Bob. So, actually, here's how big of a Diamondbacks fan I've been for my whole life. The sod I put into my backyard at my house here is called Bob sod. It's called Bob sod because it's the grass that they originally grew for Bank One Ballpark when the Diamondbacks came. Like, it's the same style, you know. So for people who don't think I'm a lifelong Diamondbacks fan, I've got Bob sod in my backyard.
Well, it rolls off the tongue. I like that quite a bit. When is Game 4? Tuesday, right?
Tuesday. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at schedules because I'm going to be in the Valley next week. I'm there for a wedding, and I'm obviously hoping to see you in person. And I'm flying in night of Game 5. Well, if there is a Game 5, maybe the
Diamondbacks don't sweep. Yeah,
that's right. But
I mean, I got a lot of crap when I had bought tickets to Game 4 of the Dodgers series, and everyone was like, "Oh, if it makes it that far," and so then I clapped back and said, "Oh, too bad it didn't make it that far," you know. So
yeah, I think I said after Game 1 because I like being over exaggerating and making what I think are funny statements like, "Oh, you're not even going to get to see it because the Diamondbacks are going to sweep." Lo and behold, that is exactly what happened, and I love that the Diamondbacks are on this run because it's continuing to weed out and identify the most brainless children on Twitter when they're complaining about playoff format. They're complaining about lack of star power. There's nothing worse, Taylor, by the way, before we got a lot of hoops to dive in, but there's nothing worse than when people say or complain or say, "Oh, this is going to be a terrible ratings series. This is going to be a terrible ratings finals." They were saying that about the Heat Nuggets. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is just say." I'd rather you say you don't like the sport. That is okay to say you don't like basketball, to say that you don't like the NFL, to say that you don't like baseball. Just say that. Don't come over to us acting as if you're some fan of the sport, and then at the same time be like, "Oh, nobody cares about Corbin Carroll and Adolis Garcia. Nobody cares about the boring Nuggets because there's no flash. We want Lakers Celtics." I obviously wanted Lakers Celtics too, but I like the game. I like the sport. There's going to be amazing storylines, and it's the same thing with baseball. It's so annoying.
you excuse me, sorry. You have to have um, teams like the Celtics and the Lakers appearing in the finals maybe more often than other teams, but people also tire of it when it's an every year thing. I didn't want to see Astros Dodgers again in the World Series. That's no fun at all. Alabama Clemson.
Georgia, Clemson,
It's
yeah.
like okay, we've watched this 4 times. So I agree with you with the ratings conversation is often dumb in professional sports, especially. It's like, yeah. So like the Super Bowl, who plays in the Super Bowl matters at this point. It doesn't matter. I think it's a little more applicable in college athletics because the fan bases do swing so much wider from a scale perspective. Um, as it relates to what the ratings are going to be. And college athletics is so much dependent on money. And if your team is in it, whatever, there's just a lot of other factors at play. So I still don't necessarily agree with the argument, but I can get it a little bit more for college sports. But pro sports, it's like, yeah, if you're a baseball fan, you're a baseball fan, regardless of who's playing in the World Series. And like, I don't think my mom's tuning in to the World Series, regardless of she's going to watch it if it's on or not. And actually, when it comes to my mom's in 5 feet behind me at my house right now. She's more likely to watch the World Series because the World Series is in her backyard here in Phoenix. So I always think that, yeah, I agree. I also think that people don't, and we have a couple listeners to this program that would probably argue with me because they worked in this industry before, and that industry is television. I think market size is a very interesting discussion in today's world. We talk about this with like Giannis and Milwaukee, and people every single day are like, Giannis, when are you going to leave Milwaukee? And it's like, well, what, like, why? What does it matter at this point? Everybody's got league pass or this or that or whatever. Everybody's, I think, almost equally marketable, compared to 20 years ago, for sure. That scale is much smaller from top to bottom. But someone said on one of these shows this week, it's a small market World Series. Yeah. Tiny markets of Phoenix and Dallas, the 5th and 6th largest cities in the country. It's like, okay, you can do things that maybe I won't say on this program if you think that cities like Dallas and Phoenix are a small market. Yeah, just because it's not New York, LA, or Chicago. These aren't like major cities. Like, get the hell out of here with that.
That's what I'm saying, Taylor. Like this is the de facto. I brought this up. I'm going to make a parallel. I brought this up with Eric Haslam during our interview about quote unquote the analytics play, right? If it zigs just a little bit, and that analysts and pundits and fans will just be like, "Oh, that's the analytics play." If it's not LA, New York, Chicago, maybe even Boston, it's, "Oh, these guys are super small markets. Such small markets." Shut up. Do a little bit of research for me one time and come to the understanding and the acknowledgement that these aren't small markets. Now, maybe you could say that these teams don't move you, they don't compel you. That's fine. But if you claim to be a baseball fan all season, all 162 games, and then come the postseason, and then your beloved Phillies choked, which is exactly what they did, or the Dodgers choked, or even the Braves choked, and then you throw a tantrum and you're like, this is so stupid. I hate the playoff format. Wall Street Journal was saying that there's lack of star power, and yeah, maybe relatively speaking, there is. I'm still excited as hell to watch Adolis Garcia. I'm still excited as hell to see Max Scherzer. I'm excited as hell to see Corbin Carroll, a rookie. Right? There's still storylines, and I'm not even the biggest baseball guy. Just say you don't like baseball.
Imagine if like a Corbin Carroll was on the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Dodgers. People would be up in arms about how amazing it is that this rookie of the year, an old school baseball guy that steals bases and doesn't have to hit home runs to be successful, whatever. People would be, yeah, all these baseball analysts would be just pleasuring themselves to the thought of like a little guy running the bases and all this stuff, and it's like, okay, come on. Just because he doesn't play in the 3 cities that you think are important doesn't mean he's not a star. He is a star. He literally, you can't dominate a baseball game without hitting a home run more so than this guy did in Game 7. Like, I know that baseball always like cherry picks their stats and stuff like that, but to be the only player ever in Game 7 history to have 3 hits and 2 stolen bases in a Game 7, like, and it's like him and Ty Cobb are like the only 2 youngest players to ever like steal multiple bases. It's like, okay, no, this guy is a star, and this is how you create stars. World Series creates stars in these type of moments. So if you only have the Mookie Betts, Aaron Judges of the world, they're already stars. We don't need to see them over and over and over and over. Not that the Yankees ever make the World Series, but sorry, Yankees. But yeah, no, I completely agree with you in that regard. That these are star more. And do people? Let's just look at the last time the Diamondbacks won the World Series. Has anyone forgotten Luis Gonzalez, Kurt Schilling, Randy Johnson? Like, do those guys just not exist anymore? Every single person that's our age can literally pinpoint, not just Arizonans, can pinpoint every single thing that happened in that series. Okay, yeah, the Yankees are in that series, whatever. I understand that that's this kind of star power they're looking for. But the team that won that series, you could tell me the happening. We were like 12 years old, and you could tell me every single thing that happened in that series. And that was when Phoenix was like the 20th largest city in the country. So get out of here with the market argument to me.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a guy where, as it relates to stars, I see Bucks are driving right now. Did they just score a touchdown? They cut it to
That's
one, Taylor.
2-point conversion.
So
Yeah.
are they? What's the score right there? Taylor's got
They're
a
up,
TV on right
they're
behind me.
the Bills, who also suck. Speaking of New York teams, are
Team.
only up 6 right now.
The second you make Mac Jones and the Patriots look decent, that's all I needed to know. All right, let's move on to college basketball. The last thing I do want to just say, though, real quick, and I'll let you get your last word in. Dallas and Phoenix, fan bases that don't necessarily like each other as a result of Devin Booker and Luka Doncic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of a subtext there. So look out for the vitriol on Twitter. Go ahead, T.
I'm so happy you said that, because I want to let the listeners of this program know something about you, Subi.
Oh, shit.
And I want you to tell the listeners what you did just hours ago before this program started recording. What did we do?
I bathed my dog.
No, what did you and I already do today at the same time?
It's been a long day. Oh,
We did
the draft.
Subi,
Fantasy basketball draft. Yeah.
Mr. Anti-Fantasy Sports, participated in a fantasy basketball draft, and I just want to make sure that
I'm a
everyone
fantasy
knows.
basketball guy.
I know. I'm just saying that
Okay.
most of the time you're kind of the anti. I'm not saying that you've never played like fantasy football since you're like in 4th grade or something like that. I'm just saying that Subi is in fact participating in a fantasy league. And I know that people do know this, but I want to make it publicly known that you are not a full anti-fantasy sports guy. I know you don't want to tweet about it. I know that you don't care about other people's fantasy teams.
Correct.
Or bets or whatever. I understand that. Okay. But yes. I just want to make sure that people know that you do actually participate in some fantasy sports.
All correct. Very accurate, Taylor. I love fantasy basketball, mostly because I have the door open right now. My wife can hear me, but it gives me purpose every single morning when I'm on the shitter to look at the lineup and set it every single day. I know folks set their lineups like for the entire week. I do it daily because I'm telling you, those 7 to 10 minutes on the toilet when I'm having a nice squat, I'm looking at the box scores and I'm seeing what the matchups are, and I set my lineup. I love it every single day, not just once a week like fantasy football, but I'm excited. And by the way, we should tell the listeners that we were very lazy and unorganized as it relates to the draft.
Oh, shoot. You're right. Maybe I shouldn't have.
The season has started. They're probably saying to themselves, what the hell were you doing? The season obviously has started, but we just have to forego these.
Let's blame a guy I don't know. And maybe he's a listener to the program, so I apologize. There's a guy in our league that's from Japan or lives in Japan, and so let's just blame him for the scheduling issues. I think that's an easy cop out, is to blame the guy who's 24 hours behind or ahead of us, 22 hours ahead of us. I'm going to blame him, even though it definitely wasn't his fault. Definitely wasn't his fault, but it's an easy person to blame.
Yeah, that is. All right, Taylor, let's get down to the nitty gritty. We got a lot to get to here, all right, for predictions. So we finished up our power conference predictions. Last episode was the Pac-12. This time, what I wanted to do was focus in on a few of the mid-majors. So we have 6 to break down. We're going to break down 3 in this episode. And then next episode, we're going to break down the remaining 3. Essentially, the criteria, Taylor, was, are there multiple teams in the top 100 based on what I was looking at, based on some of these different websites and numbers. And so what we came down to for this episode, the first 3 that we're going to look at is the Mountain West, the A10, and the AAC. So let's start now, Taylor, with the Mountain West predictions. Give me your champ.
So it's gonna be hard for me to break away from a team that's been perennially good in this conference, uh, and not just good in this conference, good nationally. Uh, had a pretty good season last year, some would say, and really, we talked about this on previous episodes. The vaunted Big 12, the the perennially good ACC, the incredible Big 10. Well, we're talking about more Final Four teams from last year in this podcast than we have on any other one so far, and so that's a pretty interesting note there.
That's crazy.
Um,
Wow.
so I'm going to go with San Diego State, a team that at this point is pretty much. Are they a top 15 program in the country? Top 20? Top 20? Top
Are
20?
you just
I
saying?
would say
Are you saying just as this coming into this
year over
season,
year.
or
No, I'm saying
you're?
year
Oh
over
sure.
year.
Oh sure.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah, yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Year over year. They have been good for essentially 20 years now in a row, 15 years in a row. And this conference should have a couple other good teams. In fact, I think 5 teams got a vote for to win this conference, not necessarily ranked, but to win this conference. So it should be a decent conference at the top end. But for me, there's no reason to not take San Diego State at this point. Boise State should be right up there in second place. I would, in my estimation, at this point. New Mexico should have an improved year. Nevada should have an improved year, but no way I can't go with anybody but San Diego State, just given their experience level they have now. Obviously they lose players and transfer portal and all this type of stuff, but especially with Dutcher having that experience now too. You've got the sky is the limit essentially once you reach a Final Four. Another program we'll talk about later in this episode in FAU, kind of similar circumstance where once you reach one of these things, this is your golden goose of a platform to create a very successful basketball school. In San Diego State's situation, they were already a very good basketball school. So to finally reach kind of the promised land, are they going to go to the Final Four every year, win the conference every year? Of course not. But I mean, at this point, they're going to be the favorites 60+% of the time, over the course of a decade, let's call it, in this conference. So yeah, short story long, San Diego State.
Why does it feel, Taylor, like San Diego State is now becoming like the Kansas of their mid-major conference? And what I mean by that is entering every single year, no matter the trials and tribulations of the offseason, what happened the previous year, entering this upcoming year, the consistency is like a machine. And I think you mentioned it. It doesn't sit right with me picking anyone else to win this conference entering every single year. I think one of the biggest things that programs lack that good programs have is stability. And it's one of those things that people just, you either have it or you don't. Like, you got to build it at some point. Baylor didn't have stability, obviously, when Scott Drew took over. Look at them now. But you look at a team like SDSU, Brian Dutcher, I don't think it gets enough attention, or Dutch gets enough credit for seamlessly taking over for Steve Fisher and continuing not only their ascent, but their steadiness as well. So I'm going with SDSU as well. Adam Seiko, he's gone. Keyshawn Johnson, we are reaping the benefits of his transfer to Tucson. But they do bring back Darion Trammell, Lamont Butler, Micah Parrish, Jaden Lee. These are all seasoned vets that have been, like you mentioned, to a Final Four. Not to be outdone, they bring in Reese Dixon Waters, who we're familiar with, comes over from USC. I don't necessarily know if there was going to be much playing time or a spot for Reese Dixon Waters at SC. And then also Jay Powell coming over from Campbell. You'll hear his name a little bit later. But I like those transfers as well there for Brian Dutcher, who, again, it can't be overstated how terrific of a coach he is. And I don't even know if there was necessarily a ton of pressure for Brian Dutcher getting to a Final Four, winning a national title at SDSU. But since he's done that, it's certainly off. I don't expect SDSU fans to think, oh, well, now we're a Final Four team every single year. I think Brian Dutcher almost has like a lifetime contract with them, unless he really, really screws the pooch in the next coming years. But I don't see that happening. San Diego, personally, you always have a place in my heart. I was in a San Diego bar when they went to the national title game, won that Final Four game against FAU. Now, I do like New Mexico quite a bit Taylor, you and I both do. We were singing their praises last year. They'll make the tournament, but this is just a respect thing almost. I look at the personnel, and even if it was coming in and out, if there was a ton of roster turnover, I'd trust Brian Dutcher. There isn't, though. There's not a ton of roster turnover. There's enough. They bring in good pieces. I respect the hell out of the Aztecs. They're winning the Mountain West.
So let me talk about a thing that I said last year. I'm pretty sure I said this last year, and I just want to come full circle and talk about how it was maybe the worst prediction ever made in the history of this program. And that was me picking Wyoming to win this conference last year.
They went through a lot of injuries. I ain't going to blame you on that. Graham Ike was hurt. Maldonado was hurt. I ain't going to fight you.
Yikes.
They weren't good.
They did get 4 votes in the preseason to win the conference, so I wasn't alone. Talk about, and this isn't supposed to be my what now becomes pretty much weekly hate on someone who we've actually gotten on this program before, but Wyoming might be the worst team in this conference this year. And that talk about something that like, and again, there are a lot of factors involved, and so I'm not trying to place blame on anybody specifically by any means. I'm just trying to say what a crazy, unfortunate 12 months this was from pretty much being, they were the odds-on favorite to finish second, and they were, I think, were they ranked, or they were at least got a lot of votes in preseason last year. Maybe they weren't ranked, but to now being the odds-on probably worst team in this conference in essentially a 12-month span is tough. It's got to be a tough thing to take, to have the, you're talking about last year, can this team make a Sweet 16? To like, is this team going to win 16 games? I mean, just it's an unfortunate thing, but I just want to make sure that I put my hand up. 2023 and also 2024 coming, still the year of accountability, I think. That's here right. On Theater and College Hoops. And so I just want to make sure that I understand how poor of a prediction that was last year.
I think you're being too hard on yourself. Like I said, there were a ton of significant injuries there in Laramie, but it is crazy how, especially for mid-majors, when you capture lightning in a bottle, you got to take it as far as you can because it can change very quickly. I mean, I'm lower on FAU than some are, and we'll get to them, but they have to build on this. Like they absolutely have to. So we'll get to them, but it's a good point regarding Wyoming. All right, Taylor, Mountain West Coach of the Year.
So interestingly, do you even remember who won the Coach of the Year last year in this conference by chance?
So I don't think it was Dutcher.
It wasn't. It wasn't.
Nico Medved?
It was Tim Miles at San Jose State.
Oh, that was it. That's a good pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were good. They were solid. Yeah.
So I'm not picking them this year. I'm just saying that, like, I'm just kind of going through why my reasoning here. So, previous year was Leon Rice, which was also deserving, but that essentially means a recent Final Four coach hasn't won the Coach of the Year in this conference in 2 seasons since Brian Dutcher won it 2 years ago. I'm going to go with Brian Dutcher because he's, even if, unless they have some catastrophically bad season, it's going to be kind of like almost, I don't want to call it a legacy award, but it's like, okay, this guy took a Mountain West team to the Final Four last year, and they're good this year too. I feel like he's going to get it out of, just a respect award at this point. Like, hey, thank you for elevating the conference to the degree that you have. So I'm going to go with Brian Dutcher. I don't think that's a cop-out to take the best team coming off a Final Four and their head coach, especially. If he had won it last year, I'd maybe be like, okay, well, he was kind of compensated for his performance of going to the Final Four. The fact that he didn't win it in his own conference and he did go to the Final Four gives me all the reason in the world to take him this time around. It's reverse voter fatigue, let's call it. So I'm going Dutch.
That's definitely a term, voter fatigue, reverse voter fatigue, that I hope to never say that again, at least until next year. Like we've definitely talked, and not just you, me as well, but I like the pick. I'm going to go actually with Richard Pitino, and I understand that I'm 2-stepping for the Pitino family. I'm probably a whore for the Pitino family. I picked Rick Pitino to win Big East Coach of the Year. But I think New Mexico is going to make the tournament after not making it last year when they had a really hot start. I think they were the last undefeated team in the country, and they haven't made the tournament since 2014. But I think Richard Pitino has all of the pieces and the experience and of that heartbreak, honestly, last year it's tough to see a team with the wheels fall off in real time. And so I think they have that as a learning experience, Taylor, where they're going to excel and Richard Pitino is going to win Coach of the Year. Jalen House, Jamal Mashburn Jr., and Jamarl Baker. Triple J, Baker still in college. What a Van Wilder House kind of guy. I'm wishing nothing but the best for him. He's an interconference transfer, comes over from Fresno State, I believe. But Triple J, man, Jalen House, Jamal Mashburn Jr., and Jamarl Baker. I like that three-headed monster. You want to talk about experience, Taylor? And any theater goer listening to this, go look at their roster. Almost all of their contributors are seniors, if not they're juniors. This is a veteran team, and that is what wins in today's college basketball landscape. Until a freshman and sophomore, like until they take over that mantle or take back that mantle, it's the senior-laden teams that are going to get it done. I don't think – so you mentioned the Mountain West has some teams that are voted to like 5 different teams that are going to would potentially win the conference. I don't think the Mountain West is all that special this year, if I'm being honest with you. I think there's SDSU and then a pretty big drop off to what I think is New Mexico and or Boise State. But I don't necessarily see it as that special of a conference where we're going to see 4 or 5 or 6 different teams get into the NCAA tournament. But you also have Colorado State. I think they could be pretty good. I mentioned Nico Medved. But this is going to go to Richard Pitino because I think all of the pieces are there for him. He's got a really good roster. He's going to bring back a basketball school to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 10 years. He has the name cachet. And like you said, I mean, nobody's going to beat out San Diego State. I don't think there's a better coach in the conference than Brian Dutcher, but I think Richard Pitino is primed for this award.
No, I think my point is that there's 5 maybe good teams. And then from there, I think there's probably, I would say, a decent line between that Colorado State and UNLV to San Jose State line. I think that's right in there. And
we got a Hail Mary in that Bucks Bills game.
Just threw a Hail Mary to almost win the game. This Bills team sucks.
Yeah,
sorry.
They really do. No, that's okay. Hey, do me a favor when you get a moment, switch that over to Lakers Suns.
Okay. Yeah, give me just a sec. So, doing my best, man. Yeah, I think there's a lot. Like Tim Miles had a good year last year. I just don't see them really doing anything special though this year. UNLV, a constant school that should be better than they are. It cracks me up.
Like I'm waiting for them. Sorry,
Yeah,
that wasn't me telling you to hurry up.
No. I know exactly what you're trying to do. Yeah. Like there's absolutely no reason that a team 5 feet off the Vegas Strip in NIL world now has multiple professional sports teams there. Like it's got all the money, and old school people still recognize UNLV as a good basketball school. The problem is, it's like, and they're like Nebraska football to like a 55-year-old guy. Like, yeah, but they're a good football school. It's like, yeah, 30 years ago. And same with, UNLV. Literally when we were born, essentially, was the last time they were good, which is nuts. So, yeah, I just don't understand how they can't even sniff being decent for more than like a year or two at a time. So let me go back to Jamarl Baker for a second, though. What year is this for him in college? This is a trivia question.
This has to be his 5th, right?
It is
at the very least his 5th.
7th.
Holy smokes!
Which included 1 redshirt year in 2017.
I forgot he was on Kentucky too. Wow.
Had we even met our now like wives when Jamarl Baker was a freshman in college?
Wow.
I have a child.
That's insane.
Yeah, right. Like that's how long this dude has been in college. That's nuts. So an average person literally had gotten their driver's license and then graduated college in the same amount of time that Jamarl's just been in college. So that's a Rick Pitino has gotten fired. Right. Like after like being at a strip club with his team, has rebuilt his entire identity at like 2 different schools now, like in the same amount of time that Jamarl Baker has been Yeah, Jamal Baker probably played against Louisville at Kentucky, and a Rick Pitino coach
Oh my
Louisville team.
God, that is crazy. What a way to break that down. Yeah, he's probably like, Coach, good to see you again. I'm glad you found your feet.
Deepen your voice a little. This dude's 35 years old.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
Man.
yeah, I just went 7th year. Let me just maybe this isn't a soapbox because don't get me wrong, I took a number of extra laps myself, but you get to a point where you just are feeling very old compared to the people around you. And so I know that this guy's trying to play as much basketball as possible, and that's great. Everyone can do whatever they want to do in life. That's fine. It's like Jamarl Baker's making any NIL money. You know, it's not like it's not like, hey, man, you want to come play on your 7th basketball team for $1 million? Like, I would get that side of it, but I guess just living the dream as best as this guy possibly can.
That's right. Yeah. He's
Also,
basically Chaz from Wedding Crash. I'm just living the dream, baby.
so is living in Las Cruces an upgrade from Fresno, where he was at the last 2 years?
Albuquerque. Have some respect. Las
Oh,
Cruces is
Yeah, excuse
New
me. Yeah.
Mexico State. I do think so.
Honestly, question still applies.
I like Albuquerque, man. My Rachel has a aunt and uncle that live in Corrales, which is like right outside of Albuquerque. Albuquerque is home to the Hot Air Balloon Festival. So I think which took place a couple of weeks ago. It's very neat. And it's closer to Santa Fe. So I got good friends from Fresno, but I would take Albuquerque.
You think there's more meth in Fresno or Albuquerque? That's a tough.
That is something I'm not equipped to answer. I'm not equipped to answer that.
Okay.
So why don't we
let's move on? Let's move on.
Let's move on to your player of the year from the Mountain West. Who you got?
So it's going to be from a school that we're talking about here. It's going to be the guy who who led the conference in points last year. And I'm going to go. It's not the preseason player of the year that the media voted in, but I'm going with Jamal Mashburn Jr. Guy averaged 18 points a game last year. And I'm going to walk it along the same lines as you just did with Coach of the Year. Say this team should be pretty decently improved there at New Mexico. He certainly has some senior guards to help him out there too. You know, like I said, a guy that already led the conference in points per game last year. I think they'll make enough improvement, to actually be, I don't know if national relevance is the way to put it, but a tournament team, a team that we should see. You know, they certainly have enough firepower to maybe pick off a Boise State for sure, but maybe pick off a San Diego State in the pit, and so I'm going to go Jamal Mashburn Jr. He does have some name cachet, obviously, being the son of Jamal Mashburn. So I'm going to go, it's a little off the beaten path here, but I'm going Jamal Mashburn Jr.
It is. I hadn't really kept my eye on Jamal Mashburn Jr. for this award. I was deciding between his teammate, Jalen House, and my eventual winner, Tyson Degenhart, T-Deggy, baby. I love this guy. He is so clutch. He's Mr. Everything for Boise State. He's been an integral part of their success. Now, obviously, you could say a guy like Marcus Shaver was the leader the last few years. This is Tyson Degenhart's team right now. I think Max Rice is a nice B or compliment or Robin, however you want to phrase it. But Tyson Degenhart is now poised, primed, and in the Boise State basketball spotlight. He is headlining this team. I just think he's going to have to do everything, Taylor. I don't know if Leon Rice's team is as equipped, 1 through 5, 1 through 7, to easily get to the NCAA tournament like they have maybe in the last few years and make some noise in the NCAA tournament. I just think Tyson Degenhart, so much responsibility is going to be placed in his lap that he has no choice but to come up huge for them. And he's come up huge for them in the past. He's very clutch. He's hit a couple of game winners. So that's why I think just the sheer responsibility for him and the success of the team, which he is going to be the guy to drive, or the driving force, I think that's going to land him player of the year. Again, he's going to touch the ball pretty much every single possession that he's in the game. I don't even foresee him getting that much rest. So we mentioned with the Pac-12 player of the year, how we think guys like Isaiah Collier and Boogie Ellis are going to win because they're going to have the ball in their hands so much. The usage rate for Tyson Degenhart, I'm going to be fascinated to see, because it's going to go through him: offense, defense, There's no special teams, but special teams in college basketball, if necessary. This is Tyson Degenhart's award to win in my eyes. So also shout out Roberto Bergerson, great friend of the program, coaching him up. I remember last year heading into the season, he said, watch out for T. Deggy. We had heard about him, but I think last year was really I am here for the Boise State Broncos. Tyson Degenhart, I think is going to win this conference player of the year for the Mountain West. All right, T, let's move on now, wrap up the Mountain West with our all transfer team. Who are the 5 names that really stuck out to you?
You're going to have to start on this one, man. I'm just going to give you that straight up right now. You're going to have to start down this train here.
I can do that. So let me start then with Nelly Jr. Joseph. Nelly, I'm going to put a Band-Aid on you, Junior Joseph. Transfer from Iona. Damn near a double-double guy. Very efficient. Shoots at a high percentage, around 55%. Actually, what I've seen, Taylor, is a lot of these transfers into this conference and some of the mid-major conferences, they can shoot the hell out of the basketball. They may not be the biggest. They may not have the greatest skill. They may not score the ball effortlessly, but they shoot at an efficient rate. And so we're going to get to some of these percentages for some of the other players. But Nelly Jr. Joseph, around 55% from the field. Will his game transfer from admittedly an inferior conference, the MAAC, to the Mountain West? But I kind of picture it like this. Let me take you on a walk with one of our favorite movies, Step Brothers, when John C. Reilly is saying to his dad, she's had the old bull. Now, does she want the young calf? He's coming over from Rick Pitino at Iona, and he wants the young calf with Richard Pitino. I kind of figure like that's how the Pitino discussion went as it related to Nelly Jr. Joseph. I'm going to go with next Isaac Mashilla. He's a transfer from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, baby. Great run the last couple seasons. Similar type of production as Nelly Jr. Joseph, and he's going to help contribute to those Triple J names that I had referenced, Jalen House and Jamal Masper Jr. and Jamal Baker. And look, Mashilla and Nelly Jr. Joseph, you know what those guys have that the others don't on New Mexico? Tournament experience, all right? TAMU Corpus Christi was in the play-in game. Iona was in the NCAA tournament. Those guys bring that. Let's go now with the Boone brothers. Keelan, first of all, a bit of a journeyman, had some good years at Oklahoma State. Then he went to Pacific on his Michael Olowokandi shit. And now he's at UNLV, still waiting for them to break through and be good. He's a sturdy body at 6'8", 200, should have a large role at UNLV. And I'm hoping to see if he can facilitate more. He's just been a bit pedestrian, Taylor, at his stops at OK State and also Pacific. I really want to see him take it to the next level. Caleb Boone, they're reunited in Vegas. Caleb stayed at Oklahoma State. I think he's going to be a bigger contributor than Keelan, but they're both going to have key roles to play. And can they be the front court that brings UNLV back to the tournament? If they are, they're going to be legends in Vegas. Really, I'm not even exaggerating. Last but not least, I'm going with Jay Powell. I mentioned him briefly earlier, but he's a 12-7 guy shooting nearly 60%. Again, there's those shooting percentages. How will his game adjust from Campbell to the tough nitty-gritty SDSU specifically, but also the Mountain West? He's got to bring it on defense. That's what I'm looking for. Increase the rebounds, especially on the defensive end. Stay out of foul trouble. You don't play defense for SDSU, man. You're going to be sitting here podcasting with us. You got to play defense if you're playing for Brian Dutcher. So my all transfer team, Nelly Jr. Joseph, Isaac Mashilla, Keelan, and Caleb Boone, Jay Powell.
So I have a question for you as it relates to transfers to and from mid-major conferences. And the Mountain West is a pretty high mid-major conference compared to, actual mid, I don't want to say actual mid-major conferences, but so oftentimes we look at the transfers in these larger conferences and say, will their game, come from a big sky and will it translate to the Pac-12 or the Big Ten? But sometimes when in the Mountain West, you get players like, say, a Reese Dixon Waters, a Max Agbampolo who transferred out of Wyoming, an intra-squad or an intra-conference transfer to Utah State. how do you look at these guys like, like a Reese Dixon Waters or like Jamar Baker's played everywhere, but how do you look at them when they transfer from a larger conference back down to the Mountain West? You know, do you think that is a more positive thing than proving that you've already done it against like a Big Sky, or is this kind of like maybe they're not that good because they fell back to a conference that was lesser than the one they had previously played in?
It's a really good question. I genuinely think it's a case by case basis, Taylor. I do sometimes think that these big name schools and these big name conferences are not the best fit for some players. Maybe they get overwhelmed. Maybe they didn't prepare as well as they should. Maybe they just didn't have it in those big conferences, and they become more comfortable in the smaller conferences, playing against maybe lesser competition, but you're gaining that comfortability. Now, there are cases certainly where bad habits and maybe you just shouldn't have been at that level in the first place. That ain't going anywhere if you go to a mid major. That ain't going anywhere if you go to because again, like Conference USA, whatever, those guys can play. Those guys can play, Taylor. We got a Final Four team from the Mountain West. We got a Final Four team from the Conference USA. Let's not even forget to mention the teams that didn't make the NCAA tournament because of the AQs. They have good players as well. I think it's a case by case basis.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, that would be, yeah, I guess it's an interesting, we generally don't have that. I guess why I bring it up is we generally don't have that conversation in any of the other conferences. We never talk about anyone falling back to the Big Ten, so it's just a different discussion as we relate to have the transfers here. And you get a lot of people more like, say, a Jamar Baker, who, I don't think you can hang around Kansas for 7 years. You know what I mean? Like, because those guys have been in the NBA for 4 years already by that point. So it's an interesting look at how this relates in the current transfer portal era, because maybe it does make some of these teams a little more nationally irrelevant because you got literally a 25-year-old point guard. And so maybe you can compete maybe for in the tournament a little better because you're playing across the way from an 18-year-old who was in high school last year, and you can rent a car legally, and so I guess there's no real overarching point to this. I think it's just an interesting discussion as it relates to how we've treated some of the other conferences. I clearly don't have a transfer team, Subi. I'm going to be straight up real with you on the Mountain West.
That's
I
all
do
right.
not have. And I just want to point out the Mountain West, and this is just West Coast basketball in general, right? If you go to the Wikipedia of like the A10, of the American, of Conference USA, of all this, right? They have stat by stat, year by year, whatever, award, transfer team, all this type of stuff. The 2023 Mountain West Wikipedia page isn't even filled in. Like, it doesn't even show like the player of the year, the coach of the year, yeah, anything like that.
Nothing.
So I'm not trying to defend myself because I clearly am less prepared for this
right.
than the larger conferences, but I just think it's funny where you're like, I can't even find the goddamn coach of the year without doing like 4-page Wikipedia search from last year or a Google search. It's just again another interesting note. This conference is one that also could potentially look different next year given how conference realignment has happened. It very much could have become like Cal and Oregon State and like at one point looked like they were going to be Mountain West teams. So this preview would have been very different next year. It doesn't look like it's going to be all that much different at this point. I just want to point that out as well, that there were a lot of moving parts as it related to the conferences around them as well.
No, it's a very good point. Here's what you can do as penance, Taylor, for your lack of preparation. I'm going to ask a second time. Please put the Lakers Suns game on. I don't need to see Josh Allen. Am I bossing you around too much? I'm sorry.
No, sorry. No, I think I'm totally fine with that. That's on me.
All good. All right, let's move on now, T, to the A10. And while you're doing that, why don't I kick it off with my champ, starting with the Dayton Flyers. Now, I didn't think the Mountain West was all that special. Brother, let me tell you, the A10 is not good. I'm usually an optimist. I'm a positive guy. I don't like hating. The A10 is not very good at all. It was kind of what it was last year. They weren't good. This year, I don't think it's much better. Like, I picture it like Home Alone, Kevin McAllister, when he dives into the cab, when he's afraid at night, he comes into the cab. He's like, man, it's scary out there. Man, it was scary last year. And then the cab driver looks and he's like, it ain't much better in here, kid. Well, it ain't much better this year, kid, for the A10. I'm sorry. So I'm going to go with Dayton. I think this is a two bid league max. So I'm kind of going with Dayton as a process of elimination. And you know how much I love Southwest Ohio. I hope they don't pay too much for losing Mike Chavrams. He's up in the Bay Area at San Francisco. That really annoyed me. Around this time last year, I got to know Mike Chavrams in terms of not actually knowing him personally, but going to one game and making the crazy assumption that I think he has a game like Kevin Durant. But I'm going to go with Dayton. You know, I've been very negative thus far. DaRon Holmes. He's special. He's very good from the Valley. Shout out Goodyear. Is that technically the Valley? By the way, is Goodyear the Valley?
Okay, it is. Everything right? In Phoenix Metro is the Valley. Yeah.
All right. I've just been so far removed. But DaRon Holmes is
Sun's game is on, just in case anyone's wondering. That we did get that on for Sub here. So
I needed that. Anthony Grant, let me tell you something, Taylor. He might be coaching for his job. There is going to be a hot little Bunsen burner under his seat this year because there's only so much goodwill at a basketball school like Dayton that you can get away with after, you know, that electric team with Obi Toppin that unfortunately derailed what could have been an awesome tournament run. Kobe Elvis, he needs to take another leap, but I'm going to go with the safe pick. I'm going to go with DaRon Holmes, and I'm going to go with the inspiration that I think and the new energy and hopeful juice that Anthony Grant has in this leadership role. I'm going to go with Dayton here, T.
So in doing the preview part of this conference, you're starting to look around, and I'm always looking for opinions other than mine, as well as ones that I agree with too. And you're spot on. It was very strange to kind of preview this conference in a way because you're expecting some of these teams to be better. And you're getting some random websites that are picking like. I feel like I found 5 different websites that also had 5 different like previews of who is going to win. Some people took the Bonnies. I see some people taking St. Louis. I'm going to go with Dayton as well. I just feel like that last year was such a underwhelming year for them,
Yes.
And they've had such a tumultuous last couple of years with having the best Dayton team ever, not having to be able to win or being able to play. Anthony Grant is a good coach. And I feel like he's got the experience. It's kind of surprising how long he's been back at Dayton also. He's been there since He's been there since Jamarl Baker was freshman year.
Is Jamarl Baker now our new unit of measurement for time?
He has to be. How many Jamarl Bakers? Oh, my daughter is like 0.02 Jamarl Baker's college career old.
So, oh my God. Tell that to your wife. See if she can decode.
She's going to be like,
hell that
what the
statement
hell are you
means.
talking about? Yeah. I'm going to go with Dayton too. They are just I don't want to say that they're a fallback, but they kind of are a fallback. They're easily the best, basketball school in this conference. They have one of the most experienced head coaches in this conference, and a team that, like he said, they have a lot to prove. This Dayton team does. They've got the best player in this conference. Spoiler alert. I just can't see another one of these awful schools getting around Dayton. Their home court advantage. Your love for Southern Ohio. Huge, it's
Southwest.
Huge.
Make sure you know Southwest.
Okay, excuse me. Yeah, because the little tip of Southern Ohio is just huge, right?
I don't even know what Southern Ohio is. Strictly Southern, yeah.
Right. So I'm going Dayton as well. I think, like you said, though, a lot of that is, and that's going to quite frankly follow with all my awards here for this conference. It's a big prove it year for Anthony Grant, for Dayton, and I think that they're going to. That Bunsen burner is going to be kind of turned down, I think, 2/3 of the way through the season, I would say.
You would hope so. So let's move on now to Coach of the Year. I'm going to go Anthony Grant again with kind of like a process of elimination. Mike Rhodes did a wonderful job at VCU the last few seasons, and that is why he's at Penn State. So I think Anthony Grant now, again, default is the best coach. And again, he's got the most to prove. These are points that we've already made, but I could also see it, Taylor, going the complete opposite way, where maybe if they drop like one or two bad games, because that's been the thing with Dayton the last few years. They've dropped a few really bad games and they've just let it completely torpedo the rest of the season. They get in these terrible ruts, and I don't necessarily see the resolve, and like they're gonna have 2 to 3 straight bad games, but you can't make it 5. And so I'm afraid that that might happen in Anthony Grant, and that he might lose the team. Uh, but I'm going to say that he's gonna come out on top. I think if if his team's gonna win the conference, I think he'll win Coach of the Year. But this is all very. I mean, they got to do something here in the interim or very soon, because there's going to be teams that are going to get better and they're going to start coming for them, right? Like, I don't think the A10 is going to be terrible for the next 6 years. Dayton needs to do something. Anthony Grant needs to do something. I think that's going to be enough inspiration, I suppose, for him to go out and win Coach of the Year. What say you?
This is going to be a pretty unremarkable segment. I'm going to just throw that out there. Anthony Grant, same things we always just said, already said. I don't think, and quite honestly, it's just because I don't think Anthony Grant is a big enough loser to get fired. I think that he is going to perform well enough at his job, and Dayton's going to be good enough that he's going to keep his job, which means subsequently, because this conference is not that good, that it's going to have to be Coach of the Year, because they're going to be one of the only 2 teams that's good in the conference. So, so I would say Anthony Grant. I think that they, same things I said about Dayton in general. I think they're going to rise above the rest of the conference this year. And I can't see, if there's only 1 or 2 tournament teams, maybe 3 at max from this conference, there's not going to be another Coach of the Year candidate.
Yeah. Let me ask you this real quick because I'd love to get your feedback before I get to the all transfer team. Did COVID ruin this program's trajectory, Taylor? I hate when people use excuses like 6 years removed. But did COVID really ruin this program's trajectory, because they were slotted to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, and then a once in a lifetime pandemic hit. The tournament got canceled. Obi Toppin left for the NBA. And I'm not even asking them to be a 2-3 loss team, whatever the hell they were entering the season or the tournament that year, but they're not even like close to that level.
I mean, it has to be the most, God, what's the way to put this? There's never been, I think, a bigger like popping of a balloon for any like basketball school ever than this situation, right? And on paper, you wouldn't have been able to be like, well, why wasn't Dayton good the last couple, the years after the COVID Final Four, right? Or what would have been? It's like, why weren't they good last year? It's like, I just think all the wind has been taken out of this program's sails. I don't really think, I don't think there is because look at what we just talked about with FAU and San Diego State. About how, boy,
that's a great point.
Talk about the jumping off platform that you have, a golden opportunity that your school might not ever get again. And if you don't use this opportunity, you just don't know. And so
that's an awesome point.
And that's exactly what happened here with Dayton. Is they could have very much had it would have been not as unexpected as Florida State or FAU and San Diego State. Don't get me wrong, but a Final Four in Dayton, the whole town would have burned down. Like that place would have celebrated a Final Four 1,000 times harder than San Diego State or FAU. They just went to the beach. Those 2 schools. They don't I mean, they celebrated. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, Dayton is
the fanhood is not the same for San Diego State. Or
yes.
My sister-in-law went to San Diego State. She's got 1 hoodie. And I'm not saying that means that they have great fans or not great fans or whatever, but I don't know anyone that is bigger fans for a school maybe at their level of basketball than Dayton is. And they're an important site,
yes,
historically and currently in the college basketball world. I mean, the NCAA tournament begins there in Dayton every year. And Ohio is a basketball crazed, sports crazed state, and people rep their universities as hard there or harder there than any other place in the country. I mean, you can't go anywhere without it. I know it's for Ohio State, but OHIO kind of applies to the state as a general sense in a lot of ways too. So, no, I can't imagine what that would be like to just have your bubble bursted quite like that. And so, I think that some schools probably would use that excuse, and people would be like, like I'm not going to hear it like from a Kentucky or from an
No.
Arizona or from we could have been it, like. Arizona, just as an example, Arizona could have had a very good basketball team that year, or a good enough basketball team that year, or maybe not. Well, no, maybe they didn't. But you would have been like, oh, well, they're just Arizona. They'll just
Do
you
it
guys.
again.
You guys have screwed it up the last 10 years.
Oh, that
This year
too.
doesn't
Yes.
mean anything.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
had your chances. This was
Yeah.
Dayton's shot, and so no, I completely agree with you that they lost this kind of opportunity. It would be like if I had a $5 million house sale like fall through the day of
Yeah.
closing, and I had already like started looking for a new house or went to go buy a new truck or something. Like it's in the driveway, like new $80,000 trucks in the driveway, right? And then I have to go,
Yep.
I gotta take this thing back. Right? That's my equivalent in my life. I don't know if what the equivalent in your life would be to that, but for me, it'd be like, yeah, having like a $5 million home sale that just all of a sudden, day of closing, you get ghosted by the people buying the house and they just don't show up.
Yeah. So I would equate it to, I've already brought up Albuquerque and the Hot Air Balloon Festival. It's literally like taking a knife to the hot air balloon and just taking everything out of it, and it comes crashing down to earth. I've been to the Hot Air Balloon Festival. It's a lot of fun. If you can't tell, like the Chamber of Commerce in Albuquerque needs to hire me. Corrales, Albuquerque, a lot of good stuff. Get some Hatch green chilies, all of it. But that's what it is, really. They got the air sucked completely out of their balloon, and I think we're seeing the downfall of that here with Dayton. So there is no program in the country, I don't think, that I feel bad for as much as I do Dayton. Before I actually go to the transfers, I'm sorry, Taylor, but player of the year, I think we got the same guy. Who is it?
DaRon Holmes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Straight and to the point. He's an NBA prospect, right? Ace Baldwin's gone. But I will say this. I don't think he's like far and away the best player, which you had mentioned. And that brings me to my all transfer team, T. And I got to start with a guy that kicked off our off season. I actually think this guy is gonna push DaRon Holmes for that A10 player of the year. Josh Cohen, man. Josh Cohen is insanely productive,
Great
and
point.
I think he's gonna thrive under Frank Martin. Josh, I love you, pal. Go kill it this year. I think he's assumed a leadership role already. That's at least what I felt when I don't even think the transfer was 100% official. But when we talked to him, it already felt like he was a leader in Amherst. So I'm looking for him to average something around 20 and 10. The scoring might dip a little bit from his days at St. Francis, but I don't think the rebounding will. I don't think his motor, his engine, his energy, any of that is going to dip. Not only because I think Josh is, I mean, I'm talking like I know the guy personally, I don't, but I know what I know what I've seen on film. But then also when you play for a guy like Frank Martin, you don't have another choice. His goal, if you remember, Taylor, in that interview, was to make an NCAA tournament appearance. Objectively speaking, I don't think UMass will, but I sure as hell hope it happens. And I can get behind a guy like Josh Cohen. So he leads off. He's definitely the best transfer in this conference.
Really good Instagram follow as well.
Great follow. Yeah.
He's a great follow.
Where can we follow? Where can we follow old Josh? Or where can you follow old Josh? Because I definitely already follow him. But I mean, I just cannot wait for him to come into the limelight in the A10. Joshua Cohen 23 _ go follow him, folks.
You know, if a basketball player is 23 in his name, it's serious.
That's right.
I don't take any other number serious if on your Instagram handle than 23. I think that's got to be true, right? That's not just me that thinks that.
It's a universally beloved number.
And Josh Cohen 11 would be like, okay, like number 11, great. So, or if you're like my buddy Travis Church 24, still on everything, I'm like, dog, that doesn't mean a thing to anybody.
23 is the sweet spot.
You have a child now. Nobody cares.
Josh Cohen, you're leading us off with the all transfer team. Greg Dolan as well comes to Loyola from Cornell. He can shoot it a little bit, but still needs to improve. I don't think Loyola is going to be all that good, but Braden Norris is still there, so they could be a decent backcourt. Again, I'm really stretching here. I don't think the A10 as a whole is very good. I do like bringing in Greg Dolan from Valentine, but there's still been some struggle for the Ramblers adapting to the A10. I mean, think about it, Taylor. They're about a Jamal Baker tenure removed from a Final Four berth, right? So I think there's still been a bit of an adjustment for the Ramblers, and it's still only year 2, I think, in the A10. So there's time, but maybe Greg Dolan will help with that. I'm now going to go with Charles Pride, comes over from Bryant. He's at the Bonnies, Mark Schmidt. I expect him to average around 15 and 8. Bonnies have kind of been stuck in the mud the last few years, despite Woj's enthusiasm and showing up to every single Bonnies event. They've just been kind of stuck in the mud. Again, this is a common theme for a lot of A10 teams, but I like Charles Pride. Max Shulga, he's next on my list, comes over from Utah State along with Sean Bairstow, who are both following Ryan Odom. Honestly, I forgot Ryan Odom supplanted Mike Rhodes, went to VCU, but I like Max Shulga. Danny Sprinkle, also at Utah State, who I love, did a marvelous job at Montana State. That's a ton of names, ton of teams I just threw out at you. Well, this is an opportunity for VCU to rebrand and start fresh. They're going to be very different, obviously, from the Shockey years and even the Rhodes years. But I think Max Shulga is going to be able to play with a bit more freedom and put his imprint on a fresh program, a program that loves their basketball in VCU. So I like this fit for Shulga. And then I'm going to stay with a European transfer, Andrei Savrasov. Shout out to Duquesne, baby. The Dukes make it on our A10 list. He comes over from Georgia Southern. Did start out at Texas Tech, though. He's got Big 12 potential. His career stats aren't that good, Taylor, but last year was a breakout year for him. He had 14 and 7. He's another big body at 6'7", 225. I have to think he's going to be the motor for Duquesne. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know a ton about Duke's hoops, but I know about Keith Dambrot. I know he can coach him up. So I like Savrasov based off of the potential that you mentioned it earlier. You alluded to it. This is a guy that was good enough to play Big 12 hoop, and now he's here at one of the worst teams in the A10. Let's see what he can do. I'd like to see him carry the load for the Dukes here. So I'm going to go Savrasov, Max Shulga, Charles Pride, Greg Dolan, and our guy Josh Cohen.
So speaking of Cohen's, should we have done, I know you're a big Bravo guy.
Oh, yes.
On Watch What Happens Live, hosted by Andy Cohen, no relation, I assume.
Watch What Happens Live, yeah.
Should we have
Watch What Happens Live?
Should we have put a drink every time we say Jamal Baker, like they do top left of the screen?
That's right.
And speaking of,
I love that. Go ahead.
Who's at the bar? Yes. Who's at the bar for us? Sharks at the bar. So
we should get our wives to be at the bar, man.
Yeah, there you go.
We can finally incorporate this.
Yeah, no doubt. So speaking of rebranding, I have one transfer to talk about in this conference, and that's George Washington, who changed their name this offseason from the Colonials to the Revolutionaries.
That's right.
So that's not the transfer portal. That's not the transfer portal that you thought I was going to go with here. But yes, the George Washington Revolutionaries, the Revs, the GW Revs, I guess is how they're rebranding this. So just keep an eye out for that. Also, I want to shout out one other school, because another school that just can never be good for some reason, despite the fact that they seem like they should be better. Rhode Island's maybe going to be the worst team in this conference. And
poor Haskard, man. Great listener of the program. He's numb to it at this point.
And I always feel like, and maybe it's because of Scard, or maybe just because of Lamar Odom 25 years ago. I always feel like, especially even over the last couple of years, I'm like, why can't this school why isn't this school a little better than they are at basketball? Last year they kind of started to take they
were terrible last year.
Yeah, they kind of started to take a dive off a cliff. Well, it was a team I bet on a lot because I'm like, they're decent, decent team to cover. Not necessarily a good team that wins all their games, but a decent team to cover. But boy, I just got smoked. So I had to give that up too.
People are waiting for Archie to really turn it around. I mean, it's kind of weird. There's some parallels between Drew Valentine and Archie Miller as it relates to year 2 in the conference. And it's like, I mean, it's okay to lose, but can you show me some encouraging signs. I don't know if the encouraging signs are there for the Ramblers and the Rams. I will say though, Gilvitas Baruta, one of like a cult hero in Rhody Ram basketball. He's on the sideline. I think he's a GA or some sort of assistant for Archie Miller. So maybe he can inject some life there in Kingston. Gilvitas Baruta, remember the name. All right, Taylor, let's move on now and close it out with our AAC predictions. We got to start with the champs. Who you got?
Yeah, I think you're about to talk about this team in a different way that I am, but I am going to go again. Same situation with San Diego State. I'm going with FAU. They bring back the best player in the conference in John L. Davis, and I think Memphis is going to be the team that competes with them for this title. I don't, at least a little bit. They were the only other school, that got any votes for anything in this conference, pretty much. I would say that, yeah, this conference probably isn't as good as maybe it was in previous years either, to be honest.
They lost a big hitter.
Yeah, and yeah, well, no doubt. Yeah, when you lose one of the 5 best teams in the country, essentially. But I mean, even like the depth of the conference, like Wichita State is picked to finish 8th in this conference, right? And they have been I don't want to say perennial power. That's not the way to put it, but I don't think necessarily they were just a one coach wonder school either. I mean, they were pretty good for a number of years. So this conference isn't going to keep me up at night. I don't think I don't think we're going to get a ton of theater from this conference, I would say, unfortunately, and that's not to be negative, but I think for me, it's Florida Atlantic. My only caveat to that is I expect more from a San Diego State than I do from an FAU. San Diego State's been there before. They have way more experience. And despite John L. Davis maybe being the best player that between those two schools, FAU just felt like way more of a flash in the pan last year than San Diego State did. So I would say, caution FAU fans. They'll make the tournament this year, I think. But this thing can come crashing down real quick too. And I'm not trying to hate on them by saying, but we've seen situations where, the tournament creates beautiful things. But at the same time, if North Carolina can go to a Final Four and also be as terrible as they are the next year, FAU sure as hell can. And I'm not trying to be overly negative about this conference, but if that can happen to one of the 5 best basketball programs in the country in a similar type of run, it can certainly happen to FAU too.
That's a really good parallel. I agree with you. So I'm actually not going to go with FAU. And I've been saying this the last few months now that it's not that I don't think, and we're saying something similar. I don't think FAU is a bad team. That's not the case whatsoever. I just don't think I'm as high on them as some other folks are. And that actually goes for their South Florida friends in Coral Gables. I don't think Miami's that bad of a team or a bad team. I'm not as high as some folks are on them. But as it relates to FAU, I think the gap between them and Memphis isn't that wide. I don't find it to be that sizable. So this is a step up in weight class for FAU as well on a consistent basis. CUSA did have some good talent. Remember, they had to play Jelly Walker. And then they also, I think, North Texas was in the Conference USA as well. So, right. So you got a UAB and North Texas, but here coming to the AAC, I do think it's a bit of a step up in weight class for FAU. I don't know if FAU is going to be as invincible as they were last year. And on the flip side, for my winner, for my champion, Memphis, hey, I started the program with Triple J's. I'm going to end it with another version of the Triple J's. They got Jaquan Walton from Wichita, Jordan Brown, who we know a little bit, and Javon Quinterly, Jelly Fam, is in Memphis. These are dudes that have similar experience to FAU. They have similar experience as it relates to playing in a few tournament games. They may not have the Final Four runs, but I also think Penny Hardaway is a very undervalued and underrated coach, right? I think he's had some gaffes, and I think people are expecting or have expected Memphis to be as good as the Derrick Rose, John Calipari days, but that ain't reasonable. Let me tell you, that's not going to happen. But it's not as if Penny has been terrible in Memphis. These guys are a tournament team pretty much every single year. They're consistent, right? They're not as good as a Houston who ran the conference. So who's next up because Houston's gone? I think it's Memphis. Last but not least, you don't think there's a little revenge factor for the Tigers here? You don't think it ate at them all season when people are loving FAU, me included? I loved FAU. When people are loving FAU because they're going all the way to the Final Four, and Memphis is sitting there being like, we should have beat them in round one. They had them dead to rights. They had the game won, essentially, and they couldn't finish. All right. That's going to propel them. That's going to drive Memphis to win this conference. So I got the Tigers winning this, man.
I'm not trying to cop out on my pick, but I completely understand the logic, because that's kind of how I feel. Like if FAU doesn't, if FAU kind of, I don't know if they're going to fold under the pressure because they've been to a Final Four, but I also think that FAU is going to be good enough, though, because I don't really think that highly of too many other teams in this conference, though. So if it's not them, it is going to be Memphis.
2-horse race. I'm with you on that.
100%. So in terms of coach of the year, similar 2-horse race, I would say. I am going to go with Dusty May. He was the Conference USA Coach of the Year last year. I think that if he does win the conference, I think any coach in the country, no matter who you are, if you switch conferences and win that conference, you're going to be the Coach of the Year. If Arizona wins the Big 12 next year, Tommy Lloyd's going to be the Coach of the Year. If whatever, I think that concept of that is just going to apply no matter what the size of your conference is. So I'm going with Dusty May. I'm guessing I know who you're going to go with. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. Kelvin Sampson's won this award 4 times. And he gone, as we've noted here. So Isaac Brown with Wichita State and Frank Haith with Tulsa were the previous 2 before Kelvin Sampson won it 2 more times previous to that. So it's going to be a new winner this year. I mean, obviously, duh. But Penny might get the Legacy Award, even though he's only been there for a couple, a handful of years. He might just get the, hey, man, you've been around for longer than anyone else, and you didn't win it a handful of years. I do feel like Penny's tough for me. I feel like he's a good coach.
He is just a good coach, but I think people bash on him.
Well, he kind of came in. He was like college basketball's super lightweight Deion Sanders, essentially. I mean, it kind of was in a way. He was flying on private planes, recruited the #1 player in the country right off the get-go. They were supposed to be just in this incredible, did they have 5 freshmen who were like 4 or 5 stars on that James Wiseman team, something like that.
Chua was there as well.
And this was supposed to be the Shador and Travis Hunter. And, first game of the year, Wiseman plays, and then it all kind of comes crashing down after that. Not unlike what's happening with Colorado football this year. Obviously, football and basketball, very different ways of building teams and whatever. But he was kind of like super lightweight Deion. Penny is not. I mean, Deion's a bigger name, but Penny's a very big name in the basketball world. Extremely big name in the basketball world. So you can talk more about him, because I'm sure that's where you're about to go right now. But he might just get it for the Legacy Award, even if they don't win the conference, to be quite honest.
You know me so well. I am going to go with Penny Hardaway. So I think the AAC, Taylor, for you and me, we have our lines drawn in the sand. All right. Like I appreciate you having nuance and saying, yeah, I definitely could see Memphis winning. I'm not copping out, but no, I want you to be 10 toes deep on FAU on your beach in Boca.
Fine. I'm a Dusty May guy.
That's right. There we go. Because you're a Dusty May and FAU guy. I'm a Penny and Memphis guy for this upcoming season. I don't mind the Deion Light comparison, because they did play at the same time. They both had similar swag. And you say to yourself, well, do these kids even care about Deion Sanders, the ones that they're recruiting? Like, they didn't watch him growing up. Did these kids watch Penny? I don't know. You don't know. But they relate to him very, very well. But I think that Penny can coach. I do. And so you're right. Kelvin is out of the way. It's now his time. I didn't even think about the fact that Penny is the most tenured. Is he the most tenured coach in this conference?
I don't know that for a fact, but let me see here. Yeah,
he could be. Dusty May is a tremendous coach. Like, I know I just said we're drawing our lines in the sand, but I'm not foolish enough to say like he's terrible or to dismiss Dusty May. But if they lose head to head with Penny, and I think that goes back to their motivation factor. And I think the gap isn't terribly wide between Memphis and FAU. I don't know how you don't give the award to Penny, who I think is going to win the conference. I think they're going to beat FAU. I don't know how many times they play, but I think they're going to beat them at least one time head to head. And that way it's going to work out for Penny as coach of the year. The only other thing I'd mention, and you kind of alluded to this with the roster construction of Memphis, the one and dones, and that's kind of been their thing going back to John Calipari. I'm excited to see Memphis with a crew of upperclassmen. And again, it bears repeating. This is what wins. Jaquan Walton, Jordan Brown's been around the block. I think him and Baker were actually on that Arizona team.
Everyone drink. Jamal Baker.
Yes,
yeah, they were both on the same team. Yep.
You're right. I'm shoehorning it in at this point. And then Javon Quinterly, who has tournament experience. He's got great success, good enough to play at Nova, excelled at Alabama, and now he's coming to Memphis. I love the leadership for Memphis, and I'm excited to see this team get behind some older guys as opposed to the younger guys. So I'm going to go Penny.
So there are two coaches that have been in this conference for longer than Penny. So household names, really, if you think about these coaches. Teams that we talk about all the time on this program, like the Rice Owls head coach Scott Pera.
Oh.
And then there's, of course, Texas basketball powerhouse, the UTSA Roadrunners, of course, and their coach, Steve Henson. So they've been around for longer than Penny Hardaway.
Are they have to be a new addition to the AAC then, right? Utsa?
I think, I believe so.
Yeah, so, they have to be, right?
Yeah. I'm just saying those are the only other, yeah.
Okay, so Penny is the longest tenured AAC coach as far as I'm concerned, all right?
In our minds.
They absolutely, because Utsa and Rice came from Conference USA, right?
Yeah. No, you're correct. You're correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm just saying the longest tenured schools at their current school is all I was going with here.
Yes. No, okay. I mean, I feel less like an idiot, but Taylor, AAC Player of the Year. Who you got?
Well, because I have my FAU flag hanging outside my house right now, in my Dusty May signed Final Four basketball, in my office. It's got to be John L. Davis, right? I mean, I don't think we're going to necessarily waver too much on this one. In my opinion, this guy could have gone to the NBA last year after his meteoric run to the Final Four. And I think he's going to have another phenomenal season this year. So I'm going to go with John L. Davis. There wasn't a lot of debate in my mind about this, but Sub, I'd love to see where you're going to go with it.
I got a Grinch smile, man. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this pick. I wanted to have some fun with this damn pick.
I love it.
And you mentioned Rice. We don't talk about them. I was about to talk about them, baby.
How?
Max Fiedler. Fiedler.
Yeah. True. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, why the hell not? Rice isn't going to be good, but this guy's good. He's very underrated, I think. And look, he's not better, I don't think, than players on Memphis or FAU. But damn it, I'm going to have fun with this pick. And I do think he's a solid contributor. I mean, he is their best player. I shouldn't say a solid contributor. I think he's good enough to be on like the first team for the AAC. But he's going to be fun to watch. I doubt he wins them many games, but he's efficient. I think he's shooting like 65% from the field over his career. I mean, the guy is a sharpshooter. He did last year. Number one overall efficiency in the Conference USA, Taylor. Right. So I mentioned about the levels in Conference USA that FAU is facing, right? I mentioned Jelly. I mentioned North Texas and Grant McCaslin, who I got as Big 12 Coach of the Year. But I didn't mention Max Fiedler, who the Owls are probably very familiar with. He does everything pretty well. Not great, but he does everything pretty well. He's a fascinating player who's going to have the ball in his hands very often. I think he's an underrated passer as well. That's probably where he's going to make his biggest impact. But like I said, I'm going to have a ton of fun. I'm hoping I'm right, because this is one of those, like, he's good. I'm joking around and
he is good. No, he is
in a funny tone, but he is really good. So if this is one of those small bets to win a ton of money, put it on Max Fiedler. Why the hell not?
I thought maybe you were going to surprise me with like a Javon Quinterly or no.
Jelly Fam's too old. No.
God, he's
Jordan Brown. No, take care of your team. Go win some games. You're past individual awards, man.
A lot of old guys on this episode of Theater and College Hoops. Like Jordan Brown was on Arizona when they had the gradient jerseys that everybody
Yes.
hated.
Now they've gone back to the 80s jerseys.
Thank God. He's somehow only 23, which is shocking to me.
He's good though. Like he was on he was the best player on that tournament team last year for Louisiana.
He also, what happened to, he missed a year of college basketball, like, and it wasn't COVID.
So it went
He didn't.
Nevada. It went Nevada, Arizona.
Did he
Was it
get hurt?
Louisiana?
Did he
He
get
may
hurt?
have.
Is that was his big deal? And yeah, because I mean, he has a year gap in his college basketball timeline.
Yeah. So like it went
Oh,
Nevada, Arizona.
Duh, because transfer rules were a thing.
Thing. Yeah.
That's how long he's
That's
been in college
crazy.
for. He's
Wow.
had to sit out that 1 year at Arizona because of transfer rules.
So there was no other school between Arizona and Louisiana, right? Or is there?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So he will have played. This is his 4th college as well that he's played for. So his freshman year was
It's crazy.
2018. Yeah.
Hell of a player though. I like him.
Yeah, we thought he was going to be better at Arizona than he ended up being. He was kind of,
That team stunk in general.
Yeah.
Like he was actually a bright spot. I'm not gonna lie, relative to everyone
I did
else.
think he was going to be better than he was, though.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, he wasn't All-American. He was a McDonald's All-American, wasn't he?
Right, exactly. And
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, yep.
Well,
Go ahead.
Speaking of him, Taylor, let's finish it out now with our transfer team. I'm going to start with Jordan Brown. Well-traveled, can contribute at a high level, has tournament experience. And I think it's also helpful that he's played for real programs like Nevada and Arizona. So I'm excited to see what he does for Memphis. Next on my list, Kobe Williams comes over from Louisiana Tech, high-level scorer, and I can see him averaging nearly like 20 points per game, which is a good amount there in the college game. Doesn't shoot particularly well. He's a 40% shooter, but does get to the line at a decent rate. Again, I don't expect much from Tulsa, but he's going to be fun to watch from a scoring perspective. I mentioned Jaquan Walton at Memphis. There's a decent amount of Memphis on this, folks. All right, so I went Jaquan Walton. He's played at Georgia and Wichita now with Penny. Pretty balanced player. You know, I think this will be the best teammates that he's had, and I could argue the best coach as well for Walton. And I expect him to be a contributor for a team that should go to the NCAA tournament. My other guy, Caleb Mills, he's pretty well traveled. Houston, Florida State, now at Memphis again. I know what I've been harping on, but I do love what Penny's built through the portal. And I suppose Javon Quinterly should be on this list as well, but I'm trying to give you names that maybe you haven't heard of. Caleb's on the smaller side, can help with scoring, but he needs to improve his shooting. He's pretty woeful from his percentages, and he needs to contribute in other areas. Memphis has Quinterly, they got Jordan Brown, they got Walton. I'm looking for Caleb Mills to really carve out his niche and his spot and how he can contribute. I think that's going to be important. Last but not least, the one transfer I think I'm most excited about to the AAC, Taylor, Chris Youngblood. I love Chris Youngblood. And if you remember
what
me
up,
last year,
Youngblood?
that's right. If you remember me last year, man, I was banging the drum hard for Kennesaw State. I was so pumped that they punched their ticket to the NCAA tournament. They were about a quarter away, like 1/4 of the game away from putting away Xavier and moving on to the next round. It was a ton of fun. But I love Chris Youngblood. Like I said, comes over from Kennesaw State, and anyone who can help turn around a program as bad as Kennesaw was, they're good in my mind. Super tough-minded player. I remember him being so incredibly gritty and clutch and just fantastic in general in that ASUN title game against Liberty. He's got to improve his shooting percentage a little bit, though. I know I've been harping on that quite a bit. He's pretty woeful from beyond the arc, actually. That's what I was referencing. Caleb Mills can improve a bit. Chris Youngblood is woeful from beyond the arc. I'm hoping he gets better there. But if he can do that, he could be a dark horse for player of the year in this conference. So I love Chris Youngblood, and I love Abdur Rahim going over to South Florida. So Kobe Williams, Jordan Brown, Jaquan Walton, Caleb Mills, and Chris Youngblood, Taylor.
So I do want to talk about someone real quick that we can't not do a preview of this conference without talking about, and that's Jalen Forbes for Tulane. He was the only unanimous selection in the preseason for the a first team all conference. And remember, John L. Davis just came off leading his team to a Final Four. I know it wasn't the same conference, but just want to point this out. Another old dude. This guy's been around for a long time, averaged 19 points a game for your boy, Ron Hunter in Tulane there. So I just want to make sure we point him out because he's definitely obviously going to be a first team all conference, but another competitor certainly for the conference player of the year in this conference. So Sue, I know this is going to be a surprise to you, but despite the fact that I didn't have transfer teams, I do have a piece of trivia to ask you.
Oh my, that is a surprise. Talk to me. What is the trivia for the AAC?
No, for these three conferences combined.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to try and roll it into one. So I want you to think about the teams because there's been so much movement in these conferences of who is played for all these teams in these conferences, whatever. So between these three conferences, the Mountain West, the A10, and the American, who would be the all-time leading scorer in all three of these conferences? So meaning who has scored the most points in all of these conferences? You might think the answer is obvious if you really think about who's been in the Mountain West and isn't anymore, but maybe it's not this guy.
I feel like I'm shitting my pants here.
Like you should at least guess this guy, even though he may or may not be correct.
Kawhi Leonard.
He holds the McHale Center record for number of points.
Oh, Jimmer. Duh.
But it's not.
It's not Jimmer, huh?
Mark Macon from Temple.
Who?
Is the leading scorer between all three of these conferences. Actually scored in his career. Jimmer scored 2,599 points. Macon scored 2,609 in his career for Temple.
What is this individual?
Mark Macon? Macon? Mark Macon, Georgia?
Mark Macon. Okay. No, I mean I have no idea who that is. Let me tell you what he said. He played for Temple.
Yes.
Okay. So let me tell you
also,
something.
18 2,000 point scores in A10 history is pretty high. If you look at the AAC or whatever this thing has been for however long it's been, there's been one 2,000 point score. And in the Mountain West, there's been 7, including Hunter Maldonado too. Actually, interestingly enough, Hunter Maldonado did score 2,100 points over his career.
Yeah, would have been helpful if he was healthy last year, Taylor,
right.
for your prediction.
This will be interesting trivia in coming years when you have people who have played basketball for 7 years that still can't even get as close as like Jimmer Fredette did in like 4, which is
Jimmer was an experience. You know that Vince McMahon meme that's going around where he's just speechless and people are like, "Daddy, what was X, Y, and Z?" Like that is going to be me when people ask me or someone asks me about Jimmer Fredette, man.
Jimmer Fredette's a guy that would have in today's world would have tried to play 7 years in college basketball and he would have just murdered everybody.
And I would have had fun watching him, damn it. Right. Like at least be fun. Like Hunter Dickinson, he's been around for a while, but he's not egregious, but he's fun. He's a villain. Like I'm not trying to come down on Jamal Baker, but there's just nothing there.
Support and like think of the NIL money Jimmer would have gotten in today's world.
Oh my God.
How do I put this tactfully? His supporters got a lot of change behind them, and they would have had a lot of income that they could have put that is currently sitting in somewhere safe, maybe like $1 trillion worth of it, that they could have put at least a lot of that towards Jimmer's future. Somehow would have gotten a waiver. He would have gotten a waiver for some. Yeah. That would have been awesome to see.
Let me tell you this. This was a great episode, by the way, but great trivia question to end it. I was going to say some players from an A10 team in Philadelphia, but I was going to go St. Joe's, and I thought it was either Jameer Nelson or Delonte West. So I'm going to give myself like 10% credit on that.
Jameer Nelson's 12th all time.
Okay.
Ooh,
all right.
Where's Langston Galloway's higher than
Langston Galloway. Is he still in the league? He's a perfect who he play for if he's still in the league. I can't imagine he is.
Deontay Christmas.
Yes.
Rasul Butler, David West from back. That's the problem though with these conferences is like there's been so many teams that like aren't there anymore. Yes. And so
Yes.
Yeah, kind of tough. So
It's a good point. All right, Taylor. Great episode. I'm glad we were able to get through 3 of the mid majors that we wanted to touch base on. Next episode, let's talk Colonial, which I don't think it's called the Colonial anymore. Not only is GW no longer the Colonials, this is no longer the Colonial Athletic Conference or the CAA, whatever. It's not the Colonial anymore. I don't know. Where the hell am I? We're also going to get to the WAC and the WCC. Does that sound good to you, my friend?
can I just say one more thing before we go?
Yeah.
Jamarl Baker.
Drink. We'll catch you next time here on Theater and College Hoops.